There is a specific way a child reaches up with both arms and turns their face toward you. And most parents get the meaning of it backwards. It is not fear of what is in front of them, and it is not a way to control you. It is the oldest signal a small nervous system has for one plain request. Help me carry this feeling. I cannot carry it alone yet. So what happens to a kid over years when that signal keeps getting answered with, "Don't spoil him," instead of open arms? It happened at my son's Thanksgiving table 2 years ago. My great-grandson, he was 3 then, came running through the kitchen, caught his toe on the leg of a chair, and went down hard on the tile. Nobody was hurt bad. A red mark on his knee, nothing more. But the room was full of people he didn't see every day. Cousins he barely knew, a dog that wasn't his. Loud voices coming from 3 directions at once. He got up, looked around at all of it, and then he turned straight to me and put both arms up in the air. Face turned away from the room, toward me. I started to bend down for him. My brother-in-law, sitting right there, with a plate of turkey in his lap, said the thing I have heard maybe 100 times in one form or another over the years. You pick him up every time. He's never going to learn to handle things on his own. I froze for half a second, with my hands halfway out. Half a second is not long, but it is long enough for a 3-year-old to feel it. I want to tell you why I did not listen to that voice, his or the one in my own head. Because I made that exact mistake already, 30-some years back, with my own oldest boy. He was 2.5. He reached for me the same way, arms straight up, face turned in, after a scare at a swimming pool. And I did what a lot of young fathers did back then. I told him he was fine, patted his head, and kept right on talking to the man next to me. I thought I was toughening him up. What actually happened was, he cried for another 20 minutes instead of 2. He grabbed my pant leg for the rest of that afternoon in a way he never had before. It took 3 more days of extra clinginess at bedtime before he settled back to his normal self. He started waking up once a night that whole week, something he had not done in months, and would only go back down if I sat on the floor next to his crib with my hand through the bars. My wife asked me at the time if something had happened at that pool. I told her no, nothing happened. He just fell off the step and got a mouthful of water. I did not think to connect the 2 things, the mouthful of water and the week of broken sleep. I did not connect those dots for years. My name is Everett Voss. I spent 31 years working inside elementary schools. Most of that as a school counselor, watching thousands of kids come through my door, upset, overstimulated, scared, and watching close up what actually calmed them and what made things worse. I raised 4 kids of my own on top of that. I am currently on grandchild number 9, and I have lost count of how many times one of them has reached up at me across a crowded kitchen. So when I tell you what that reach means, I am not guessing. I have watched it up close for most of my working life. Quick word before I go further. The old methods my family uses, there is more of it than fits in any one video. I gathered the whole of it into a book you can buy in our pinned comment below. The book is the long version. If you want it, it is there. I will not mention it again. So if that reach was not weakness, and it was not fear of the room, what exactly was my great-grandson asking me for? Here is where most people get it backwards, and I got it backwards myself for a long time. We assume the reach is about the thing right in front of the child, the strange dog, the loud cousin, the fall itself. We treat it like a fear response to one specific danger, and so we try to talk the child out of the fear. That's not fine, there's nothing to be scared of, come on now. Or we treat it as a test. We assume the child is checking to see what they can get away with, and so we hold back on purpose, to prove a point about independence. I did both of those things as a young father. Neither one is what is actually happening in a small body at that moment. Here is what 3 decades of watching this up close taught me instead. A child under about 7 does not yet have a fully built system for calming themselves down on their own. That system is still under construction. It finishes later than most people think, sometime in the teenage years, for the last pieces. Until then, a big feeling, a fall, a fright, a room full of strangers, floods a small nervous system faster than that system can drain itself back out. The reach is not a request to be rescued from the dog or the fall. It is a request to borrow a calmer nervous system standing nearby, so the small one can settle using the big one as a kind of anchor. Researchers who study early childhood have a name for this. They call the parent a secure base. Picture a kid at a playground who is not attached to anyone standing there. Watch how far that kid wanders. Now picture a kid whose mother is standing right at the edge of the sandbox. Calm, watching, available. That second kid wanders further, climbs higher, takes more chances because there is a base to return to when it gets to be too much. Take the base away or make it unreliable, and the child does not become more independent. The child becomes more careful, sticks closer, checks in more often, because the base cannot be counted on. I saw this play out in my own school building more times than I can count. There was a boy, I will not use his real name, who came to my office almost every Monday for the better part of a year. Nothing dramatic ever happened to him over the weekend. No single event I could point to. What I eventually pieced together, after enough conversations with his mother, was that he had been told from an early age to stop crying and go play. Every single time he reached for comfort after a fall or a scare. By the time he got to my building, he was 7, and he could not sit through a fire drill without needing an adult's hand the entire time, could not handle a substitute teacher without a stomach ache that sent him to the nurse. He was not a weak kid. He was a kid whose base had never been reliable enough to lean on, so he never stopped checking whether the ground under him would hold. This is the exact opposite of what my brother-in-law believed at that Thanksgiving table, and it is the opposite of what I believed 30 years ago at that swimming pool. Here's the counterintuitive part, and I want you to sit with this one. The kids who get picked up the most in those early years, when they reach for it, are not the clingiest kids by the time they hit 2nd grade. In my 31 years watching kids walk through a school counselor's door, it was almost always the other way around. The kids who struggled hardest to separate from a parent at the classroom door, the ones who could not settle after a small bump or a loud noise, were far more often the ones whose reach had gone unanswered again and again at home. Not because their parents didn't love them, because somebody told those parents, same as they told me, that answering the reach would spoil the child. The need for the secure base does not go away when you ignore it. It just gets louder, and it starts showing up sideways, months and years later, in ways that look nothing like a raised arm at a birthday party. So how do you actually answer the reach in a way that does what it is supposed to do, instead of turning into a habit you dread by the end of dinner? I want to walk you through 5 things I have used for years, in my own kitchen and in 100 classrooms. The first one I call reading the reach, because not every reach means the same thing, and the shape of it tells you what is actually needed. Arms straight up, face turned fully toward you, away from the room. That is a full request for contact. Pick the child up. One arm reached out while the child is still watching whatever startled them, eyes still on the dog or the stranger. That is something different. Researchers call it social referencing. The child is checking your face to see how worried they should be. That one you can often answer with a hand on the back and a calm voice. No need to pick them all the way up. And then there is the reach that comes with the face. Buried straight into your leg, arms wrapped tight, refusing to look up at all. That is not a request for comfort in the middle of the room. That is a request to leave the room. Reading which one you are looking at in the first 2 seconds changes what you do next. And it is the single biggest thing that separates parents who calm a child quickly from parents who end up wrestling with a meltdown for 20 minutes. I used to run a small demonstration with new teachers before the school year started, showing them photographs of kids mid-reach and asking them to guess which type they were looking at. Most missed it at first. They looked at the crying, not the arms and the face. By the 3rd or 4th photo, most of them had it. It is not a hard skill. It is just one nobody ever points out to you, so you go years without noticing the difference is even there. The second thing is what I call the count of 2. When a child reaches and gets no response at all for 10 or 15 seconds, the request does not go away. It escalates. The arms go from reaching to grabbing. The voice goes from a whimper to a full cry. So the rule I use, and the rule I taught to 100 young teachers over the years, is simple. Respond within a count of 2, even if all you can do is speak. I see you. 1 second. Works almost as well as picking the child up immediately, because the nervous system settles the moment it knows the base has registered the signal. What it cannot handle is silence. The third thing is low and close before scoop and distract. This is the one most parents get wrong without realizing it, myself included for years. The instinct is to scoop the child up and immediately hand over a snack, a phone, a toy, anything to short-circuit the crying fast. That works in the moment. It also skips the actual job, which is letting the feeling move through and settle rather than get paved over. Instead, get down to the child's eye level. Hold them, or hold their hand if they are past the age of being picked up. Let a few seconds pass before you offer any kind of distraction at all. The fourth thing is name it before you fix it. Once you are down at their level, put a simple word on what just happened. That was loud. That scared you. You fell hard. Nothing fancy, 4 or 5 words said plainly. This does 2 things at once. It tells the child their experience was real and seen. and it hands them a piece of vocabulary they will eventually use to describe their own feelings without needing to cry to communicate them. I have watched kids as young as 4 start doing this on their own, walking up to a parent and saying, "That was scary," instead of falling apart, simply because they had heard the words modeled enough times. The fifth thing is, let go first. This is the one that surprises parents most. When you pick a child up after a reach, do not set a timer in your head for how long is appropriate. Let the child decide when the contact is over. In my experience, in my own kitchen and in classrooms, this is almost always shorter than parents expect. 20 seconds, sometimes 40, rarely longer than a minute. But parents, especially in front of other people, tend to pull away far sooner than that because of their own discomfort, not the child's. A relative watching, a comment like the one my brother-in-law made, pressure to look like you are not spoiling anyone. I started timing it once, out of pure curiosity, with a stopwatch on my phone during a rough week with one of my grandkids. Longest hold was 55 seconds, most were closer to 20. Once the time was up, the child simply turned around and walked off to whatever they were doing before. No lingering, no extra fuss, like a switch had flipped back the other way. Letting the child set the end point, rather than you, is what actually finishes the job the reach started. One more small tool, and it costs nothing beyond a marker and a piece of paper. A simple feelings chart taped to the fridge, a handful of faces with words underneath, happy, mad, scared, tired, gives a child something to point to on the hard days when the words won't come out on their own yet. Nothing fancy required. A paper plate and a marker does the job just as well as anything you'd buy. None of what I just walked you through is complicated. What is hard is doing it in front of people who are convinced you are doing it wrong. So let me zoom out for a second, because I think this matters more than any one technique. This was never about raising a soft kid. The research on secure attachment, going back decades now, keeps landing on the same finding. Kids who have a reliable base to return to in the early years explore further, take more chances, and recover faster from setbacks later on. Not fewer chances and slower recovery, the opposite of what most of us were told growing up. I have a line I have said to enough young parents over the years that I no longer remember which one of them I first said it to. A child who is sure of you does not need you as much. A child who is unsure of you cannot stop needing you. Every time I answered my grandkids' reach, instead of brushing it off, I was not making them weaker. I was making the ground under them a little more solid, so that someday, and it does come faster than you expect, they stop needing to check. My oldest boy, the one from that swimming pool story, is 35 now. He works overseas half the year on his own, handles things I would have found terrifying at his age, and calls his mother every single Sunday without being asked. I did not get everything right with him. Nobody does. But once I started answering the reach, instead of brushing past it, somewhere around his 4th birthday, the extra clinginess I had built into him over those first 2 years slowly unwound itself. It did not take another 30 years. It took closer to 1. So here is what I want you to do tonight. The very next time your child reaches for you, whether that is in an hour or tomorrow morning, count 2 seconds in your head. Get down to their level. Say nothing to whoever else is in the room, no explaining yourself, no apologizing for picking your kid up, and let your child decide when the moment is over, not you. That's the whole thing. Tell me in the comments how old your child is and what happened when you tried it. I read every one of them. Next time I want to show you the reverse problem, the child who reaches for you and then will not let go at the classroom door no matter what you do, because that one nearly broke my daughter-in-law 2 years ago. And the fix that finally worked came down to a worn photograph, folded up small enough to fit in a coat pocket, of all things. It took us 2 weeks to land on it, not 2 years. And once it clicked, the morning drop-offs went from crying at the door to a quick wave goodbye almost overnight. I will walk through the whole thing next time, start to finish, so you have it ready before the next hard morning shows up at your own front door.